Papa Boy.
All right, everybody. It is just now the stroke of 10 a.m. by my clock, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's kind of start off as I think we generally will with these kind of lecture class sessions kind of early in the semester. Our assignment for today was to kind of crack open the ancient era of the history of forest recreation and start thinking about how, again, the observations we're taking, the insights we're taking out of ancient China and early Japan, and all across sort of continental Europe and Asia and so forth. We care less about sort of just like the history of it. Again, I'm not gonna nail you guys and gals with a bunch of specific dates from this section and so forth. But I do want us to have kind of an idea of the threads connecting how we think about forest and outdoor recreation today, because that kind of shapes things like career arcs a little bit, shapes things like laws and policy that create and govern our parks and other protected areas that we use, at least partially, for forest and outdoor recreation. So the Park Service is primarily about forest recreation and science. Fish and wildlife, consumptive and non-consumptive kinds of forest rec are a big deal for them, and so forth. And that's all kind of based out of like right there in the language that created these federal agencies as examples, and a bunch of state agencies and stuff like that. The founding fathers and folks who came after tend to base their arguments and justifications for stuff like this out of ideas that are thousands of years old. With the interesting twist that now we use parks to serve all people instead of just the royal elites like they used to in ancient times. So with that kind of preamble, what questions or needs for better clarification you guys and gals have after going through the history of ancient rec PowerPoint? Again, that's due for today, but there's not like a timed cutoff or a surprise quiz on it or anything today. So if you're still kind of lagging behind, getting your feet on the ground with all this online class stuff, that's fine. I'm not gonna spike you for that here. What questions do you guys and gals have? Otherwise, we'll just gonna chat about some ancient rec and more recent stuff as a group, and then kind of go on from here. Questions?
For the what's it called? Like the checklist. Like if you like say cuz I did all the previous like videos and everything, but I just didn't like click on them cuz I didn't know like where I was supposed to go. And I just did like I think yesterday or the day before, one of the 2 days. Like uh if I got if I like click yes on all those times, will I get like point, points off because I didn't do it. I didn't just check them off. Like I did like view them. I just didn't like check them off.
Fair question, my guy. So what Raul was talking about here, for those of you unfamiliar with the checklist, is in the resources section of the website. It's the fourth link from the left in like desktop or laptop view. And if you click on that, it brings you a list of content. Calendar checklist is the third one. So if you click that, I've started putting together and releasing just kind of an ordered list of the basic milestones in this class. So this is more for your use than mine. As the professor, I can kind of see who's checking what boxes and so forth, but I'm not particularly basing grades on this per se. This is mostly just so you have like an in-order list of whatever we talked about. So if you miss a class session or whatever, you can, take a look at this and kind of see what you haven't seen before yet. So you can use those checkboxes to kind of track for yourself. Okay, I can't remember if I did this section or not. We go back and see it checked because you checked it off. You're good to go. That also has the, again, approximate due dates off to the right on that in desktop view as well. So the answer to your question, Raul, is if you do or do not check them, again, that's primarily for your organization so you can kind of know where you're at and see your progress as you go. And I'm not putting sort of everything on this list all at once, so it doesn't look like it's just this huge list. Generally, you'll see mostly things that you've already completed on this list. Okay.
All right,
So
because like
this will go live
I
kind
only
of as
noticed it
each section
yesterday.
goes live. Yeah. Yeah. Just set it up this week for you guys. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Oh,
Hopefully,
one other
hopefully I
thing.
don't totally screw it up and it doesn't become confusing. But yeah, we'll just kind of add to it as we go. Yeah.
One other thing, like for what's kind of the difference between Epicureanism versus hedonism? Is it more just like one's based on pleasure more, or
Yeah.
like
Okay.
because
Good question.
Epicureanism and hedonism seems kind of similar, but I feel like there is a difference, but I'm not sure what it is.
Okay. So they're both kind of on the same general end of things in terms of how they kind of structure the point of existence. These are both schools of thought that are trying to deal with questions like, what's the meaning of life? Why are we here? What is valuable and what's worthwhile? What is not? And there are definitely some conflicting schools of thought that we've kind of cobbled together for this class. And hopefully going through all of these to kind of zoom out from your question, Raul, for just a moment, you can see characteristics of some of these different schools of thought, maybe either in yourself or in family members or friends that you know pretty well. Cynicism, for example, means something a little bit different than being cynical as today. Maybe you know some folks who are skeptics. So the kind of person that would say, in God we trust, all others bring data, and here in the Midwest, having lived in a bunch of different places around the country so far, I can say that a lot of Midwesterners kind of tend towards Stoicism a little bit. These days, Stoicism has also acquired the meaning of being that person who's not gonna walk into like a party and just take over by out talking everybody. Stoic often these days means kind of quiet, not necessarily, stupid or poorly socially adapted or whatever. Just feel the need to like be chattering all the time. So just be careful as you're going through these schools of thought that you don't conflate modern meanings of being Stoic versus the original sort of Greek school of thought, Stoicism. That could be a little bit confusing. All right, so let's get back to your question, tackling Epicureanism versus hedonism. So the Epicureans, these days an Epicurean might be somebody who really enjoys travel and finding cool restaurants with tasty foods, not for the purpose of like gorging yourself and that sort of thing, but more like just finding new opportunities to savor tasty stuff, to see what's around the next corner in or along a hike and that sort of thing. So the Epicureans really are going to hang their hat, so to speak, on this idea of we are free to enjoy leisure and live simply. And that's part of a necessary part of sort of a high quality life. Like you understand more perspectives, you tend to be more thoughtful from traveling and seeing other people living other ways and realizing these people are happy, they're chill, they're doing fine. And then being able to, sort of take back with you whatever parts you like from a variety of different cultures, their foods, some of their general sort of practices and beliefs, stuff like that. And then just kind of live simply, like ain't hurting nobody else, And the hedonists, by contrast, so they're also into things like travel and good food and stuff like this. But for them, instead of living simply and leading sort of to the extent possible, a leisure-filled, sort of healthy, balanced life with travel and stuff like that. The hedonists are more like, let's go hard in the direction of having fun, because that's kind of the point, right? So to the extent that a society can develop, it's freeing us up from stuff like manual labor in mines, manual labor out in a farm field, so that we have more headspace, so to speak, for doing things that are fun and pleasurable. Okay, so hedonists are also going to be all about maybe having some good foods, going on hikes like the Epicureans, but for them, it's much more of the central thing. It's much more the drive. So this is, hedonist might be somebody who is more of a work hard, play hard person than a live simply person. Do you see the distinction there, Raul? Hopefully so.
Yes, I do. I was trying to shake my head. Sorry.
Yeah, okay. So things like fame. So modern equivalent, might be a social media influencer. And, like when you watch a pop music rap video or like a hip hop music video or something like that, they'll be doing stuff like fanning out them dollar bills and just like draped in gold alloy chains, and they have beautiful people around them. Maybe they're like pouring liquor out on each other and stuff like that. Just like, that's more of a hedonistic sense. Like that's an aspirational goal for somebody who's super hard in the direction of hedonism, versus an Epicurean. We might think of it as more of like a refined and slightly more civilized take on seeking things like leisure and, by extension, outdoor recreation. So this might be, an Epicurean might be somebody who wants to, in their lifetime, travel to all 60 plus national parks in the US. That's a pretty cool Epicurean style goal. A hedonist goal might be to find a half a dozen national parks and just go ham, like stringing those together in like the craziest blowout spring break trip ever. Okay, and then getting the sick GoPro edit so you can drop it on social media and increase your influence and get sponsors. So that's a good question. What's the difference between hedonists and Epicureans? What other questions you got?
I kind of want to ask a question that expands on that with the Cyrus of Persia thing.
Sure.
Would you say that Alexander the Great would fall more into that category, that same category as Cyrus?
So yeah, they're both examples. Alexander the Great is he is pretty closely connected with. I'm couching hedonism as a function of Greek culture. Alexander, I believe, was Macedonian, which is sort of a rocky mountainous region north of what is now modern day Greece. So they're culturally pretty tightly related, but they're not exactly the same thing. But yeah, Alexander the Great, in some ways, could potentially fit into that. I'm not sure. Can't remember the exact timing of Alexander the Great's conquests all around the Mediterranean. But he had a huge effect culturally on a whole bunch of other Mediterranean cultures. I mean, the Ptolemies of Egypt were based out of Alexander's conquest. Like he, kind of took over the known world at the time, and a bunch of his generals afterward kind of spread out and took over a bunch of places, and completely changed the trajectory of places like ancient Egypt, which was a pretty big deal back in the day, for sure. Yeah, that's a really good question, Luke.
Thank you.
What else? This is awesome. These are great. I'm happy to answer these questions, and we'll kind of use this flipped class model for all this lecture stuff, where you can kind of take yourself through it at your own speed, however you like to, maybe while you're working out or whatever. And then this gives us plenty of time to clarify things that are kind of more specific instead of just going through this all together lockstep on Zoom, which sounds absolutely the opposite of a hedonistic good time. What other questions you got? All right, so let me follow up with a question to y'all. For the section kind of transitioning from Greek to Roman to Christian, that's that's compressing a couple of 1,000 years of Mediterranean, like Southern European cultural history into like a slide. So we're talking about ancient Greece, for example, and then we just kind of fast forward like 2,000 years. So is everybody pretty okay and comfortable with that transition? Did I do an okay job kind of bringing us forward from one culture to the next, or does it feel pretty disjointed and
The only thing that
fractured?
I don't think I heard, I might have just been like too focused on writing down those stuff, but I didn't really hear the Christian part of it. I heard the wealth when it came to being neutral, and then like pastoral, like where it's retirement with the Romans, where it's like you want to make a villa, you want to get enough money to retire, just go to a villa, just sit down and just, hey, live your life of leisure. Like you've done your job, you did what you did. Just rest until you pass on. But I haven't heard the Christian one. Technically, it's right there. It's like evil distraction, but I didn't think you really went too much into that, unless it's just evil distraction and that's it.
Stay tuned on most of the detail on the Christian side of things. So one of our upcoming units is going to be kind of moving from, sort of ancient cultures all around the world to a more, hopefully more familiar context, kind of heavily centered on Western Europe, because that's where a lot of us, have ancestry here at SIU and so forth. England, Scotland, Ireland, the Northern European states, the Germanic states, Scandinavian states, stuff like that. So tracking some of these cultural threads through Western Europe from Mediterranean all the way over to the United States eventually is very much the arc of the spread of Christianity as well. So we'll have a lot more detail in that particular direction. That's a good question.
One last thing for Sumo.
Yeah.
Like, so it's leisure because like people just have fun there, like they gamble, they interact, they get drunk, that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, and so Sumo is a really, really, really good window into an ancient culture that tends to be a little bit less familiar to us here, in the United States, unless you're a total weeb like me and this is interesting to you. So let's talk about Japan for a sec. So the idea here with sumo rights, in all of these cultures, leisure is only possible to the extent that they have a surplus of things like calories and labor and if you want to think about it, lifespan, right? It's like if you're spending 16, 17, 18 hours a day, like subsistence farming or hunting and gathering, you may not really have the calories or the time or the energy to do stuff like identify a couple of exceptional sort of physical specimens in your population and have all the pomp and circumstance of sumo, which is like a very, very ancient and just as absurd, but in some ways also incredibly serious version of what we would identify today as professional wrestling. So it's a kind of wrestling not unlike Greco-Roman style wrestling, where there's no typically there's not maneuvers focused on leg holds and stuff like that. It's more just absolutely overpowering your opponent and blasting somebody who's hundreds and hundreds of pounds, and their entire lifestyle is around becoming as massive and as strong as they can be, both for sheer inertia and also for explosive power to push the opponent out of the ring. Like none of that happens if you're spending all your calories on, you know, just trying to stay alive, and you know the average life expectancy is something like 35. So sumo is a good window for us gaijin or sort of Western outsiders to Japanese cultures to understand. So this is their version of the Olympics in a way, and sumo goes way, way back. So this is a clue that, okay, so in Japanese cultures, way before some others, they had that calorie, time, basic overall society development surplus that they could do things like sumo rights. It takes a lot of surplus protein to take a regular person and elevate them to professional athlete status. And it takes even more to elevate a professional athlete to sumo status. So if you want to think of it this way, The Rock has, I don't know, how many dozen chicken breasts like per day just to maintain protein and calorie intake for the massive, you know, wall of meat that the Rock is. Same thing with sumo, but certainly much bigger than The Rock. Like these are a bunch of like 6'5" and up dudes who weigh hundreds and hundreds of pounds, and it looks in many cases just like adipose tissue, but there's a ton of muscle under there. So these guys are accelerating huge mass over short distances. They're basically human railguns. All right, so with sumo, it's if you've never watched a match, it's kind of a pomp and circumstance kind of thing. Like there's all the gambling, Raul, that you mentioned. There's all like the hype man talk about it, but there's also integrated Shinto ritual. Like a priest leads a little procession with a couple of acolytes and each sumo person before each match in sort of a ceremonial march around the ring. And then the Shinto priest moves off to the side carrying this big old banner, and there's incense and all kinds of stuff. There are sort of ritual offerings of grains that are sort of tossed onto the ring, partially as like sand and also as a traction element. And then the sumo guys sort of go through this whole ritual, and then, you know, it's Clash of the Titans. So this is, again, in this culture, another example of an ancient culture elevating specific individuals who are not themselves otherwise nobles, but they're ritualizing things like combat. We'll hear later in the Western Europe section how if a knight fell on the field of battle, they would actually stop the battle, and like both sides would, you know, mourn the falling of this noble warrior. Meanwhile, the footmen and mercenaries might be getting slaughtered by the dozens or hundreds in a lot of these battles. Sumo is another sort of further step to take the warrior, the fight, the battle, and make it more symbolic for the entertainment, largely of extremely wealthy elites. So these days, you know, if you get the Japan package with your cable, not that anybody's getting cable anymore, right? We're all untethering, but you know, you can watch sumo matches today, and statisticians have uncovered a highly ritualized dynamic inside and among the sumo wrestlers themselves, where if one of the guys is kind of struggling that season and needs to get up to like the minimum number of wins or the number of points to move on to the next level, they'll kind of help each other out in the same way that professional wrestlers in the United States with, I don't think they can use the term WWE anymore. I think they're getting sued for that one, just like WWF. But anyway, professional wrestlers these days, you know, the matches are kind of scripted out, and they help each other out. They account for things like injuries and recovery periods and stuff like that. So there's betting on it, and it's partially like the fix is in. Really interesting stuff if you want to get into it. But what we're looking for out of Japan is that this is another Eastern example of how things mostly focused on the ancient equivalent of the ultra wealthy. So these would be like the 1%ers of the day, basically sponsoring these matches in the same way that Roman gladiators, were sponsored athletes, and Greek Olympians could do pretty well for themselves by competing successfully. Okay.
All right.
Cool. So we have professional athletes today. We have professional outdoorsmen or outdoor sports folks these days as well. It's largely more corporate sponsorship than patronage these days, but the functional idea is the same. You're promoting yourself or your corporation by attaching your image to, clean cut, highly skilled, charismatic athletes, or, people who are competitively sport fishing or whatever. And that kind of goes for all sorts of outdoor rec activities as well. So as a park ranger, you're not just potentially dealing with, folks out on a hike. Let's say you're working at Canyonlands National Park out west in Red Rocks country. It's a beautiful place in northeastern Utah, just outside of Moab. And there's probably 100 or more miles of super twisty slot canyon hikes inside it's actually not that big. It's maybe like a 5-6 mile square area. It's like walking around in the intestines of the planet. It's super, everything doubles back on itself. So it's a super fun place to go hiking, day hiking, or backpacking for a longer period. And the backcountry rangers, whose job it is to patrol that space and other sort of more wild backcountry spaces right around that, they're hiking around, they're checking in with people, making sure that everybody's got enough water. It's a desert environment and stuff like that. So, we all think about, a backcountry ranger, a park ranger, or a law enforcement ranger, patrol officer, that kind of thing. Kind of just dealing with the general public. But there's also this whole other layer of folks who are much more serious about it, not just in high skill, high investment, like they have all the fancy gear and stuff like that, kind of the prosumer level. There are legit actual professionals. This is their full-time work to do things that many of the rest of us might aspire to. So, for example, when I was hiking the Appalachian Trail, I hiked with a gal who was sponsored by the company Moon Pie. So if you've ever been to a gas station and gotten those like marshmallow cookies, like Moon Pies, they sponsored her on a Goodwill tour up 14 states from Georgia up to Maine in the year we were hiking the Appalachian Trail. So she got a whole bunch of free Moon Pies and some like Moon Pie merch with the express kind of not order, but agreement with Moon Pie that Moon Pie, the company, that she would basically pass out free Moon Pies to thru hikers who need the calories, so that thru hikers come to like or know or appreciate Moon Pie, the brand, and buy a bunch of Moon Pies. So there's this kind of commercial layer these days, and that is a thing all around the world now. So, as a forest ranger, as a park ranger, maybe you're thinking about a forest protection officer. You're thinking primarily at this point about like us, the regular folk, right? Commoners, the not 1%ers. We're out there in force, and it's amazing. And these days, very lately, kind of since the 90s only, the last couple of decades, the explosion in corporate sponsorship, basically just for marketing purposes, right? How many outdoor rec videos has Red Bull put forth? Hundreds of them through their network of skydivers, alpine skiers, snowboarders, skateboarders, parasail, like all kinds of stuff. We'll see a bunch of examples of those later in kind of the modern section, but yeah, keep that in mind. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Super long answer to your question, Raul. Did we cover it?
Yeah, we got it. I just want to make
Alright.
sure.
Good deal. Good deal.
I'm sorry. I actually have a question. This is a. Can you hear me?
Sure can.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just have. This is a question for you. Now I've never personally been to a national park before. I really want to go. I feel like I was just gonna ask, what would you recommend as a park I should go and visit?
Oh, that is the only question that matters in this class all semester. I'm kidding. No, but that's one of my favorite questions. So let's just talk about parks for a hot second. Okay, so we haven't really had like the mosaic discussion yet. How like national parks and forests and wilderness areas, and wildlife refuges and recreation areas and national scenic trails, historic trails, recreation trails, wild and scenic riverways, seashores, marine protected areas, like a huge section of the United States in sort of this quilt looking fashion all over the map is set aside for natural resource protection. And some of those like national forest extraction, sustainable, multiple use yield the best benefit for the most people for the longest time, right? We need those watersheds. We need the board feeded timber, the pulp, the wildlife habitat, all of that stuff. We need that. And forest and outdoor recreation is super compatible with clean watersheds and super high quality wildlife habitat. Like the main visitation up over 95% for most wildlife refuges, the thing that gets bodies on the refuge, human bodies, or in a national forest, is overwhelmingly recreational use. And it might be consumptive like hunting or fishing, it might be non-consumptive like hiking and taking photos, whatever, it might be a blend. So we have a gazillion amazing options here and now in the United States, more than anybody in human history has ever had. So Zach, like for example, if you're asking about national parks, but if your goal for going to the national park is to enjoy some wild places and so forth, did you know that you have 6 or 7 federally designated wilderness areas within about a 1-hour radius of Carbondale? So that's almost unique in the United States. Most wilderness areas are way far away from towns and cities. They're huge. And so like you got to travel far to get to one, and within an hour radius of that spot, it's probably the only one. Maybe there might be another one like next to it created later, for example. So part of the answer to what's the best national park to go visit is it may not even be a park. According to your desires, it might be a wilderness area. It might be a wildlife refuge. It might be any of the others, right? We have units like tall grass prairies. There's nothing wrong with prairies. They're gorgeous. The Flint Hills of Kansas are gorgeous. And it's just, aside from like the interstate, which runs like right through it, and a bunch of huge like military bases, like artillery training ranges and stuff, like at Kanza. It's all just there. It's a bunch of open range. It's beautiful, and you can just go rambling around. Yeah, so it's all amazing, according to the specific reasons that you want to go. So one of my favorite places personally is a national park called Haleakala National Park. We'll hear a lot about that this semester as we go. It's in Hawaii on the island of Maui, which is sort of a sideways figure eight, almost like an infinity symbol shaped island. You got the Western Mountains on one side, and then you got this 10,000 foot high cinder cone volcano on the other side. So it's 10,000 feet above water and 20,000 feet of the same cone down into the bottom of the Pacific. It's actually taller than Everest, but 2/3 of it's covered by water. That might be one of the, if not the highest prominence on the face of the planet, one of them, at about 30,000 feet in elevation, total elevation change. Pretty cool stuff. And inside there's like this, I think it's maybe 3 by 7 mile crater up at the top. It's an erosional crater. It's not like a blast crater. And inside just the floor of that crater, with crater walls 1,000 to 2,000 feet high, which block all sound. This is one of the quietest places on the face of the planet. It's just a little wilderness area, and there's a bunch of trails, and we don't really sort of advertise the position of them, but native Hawaiian burial sites and some of the lava tubes, some extremely culturally significant spots. Oh yeah, and some of the best like dawn and sunset viewing you've ever seen in your life. Like imagine cloud cover over the Pacific at 5,000 feet. In the floor of that valley, you're at 7,000 feet. You're a half mile above the clouds, and you get to see the sunset and sunrise colors coming down or punching through that cloud. Man, the place is
Awesome.
magic.
Yes.
So that's one for me, based on my values of I love solitude. It's a crazy hard hike to get up from sea level, up 7,000 feet to get into that valley and so forth. And they super restrict the number of people that can be in there at any time. So it really genuinely feels like you have the place to yourself. They actually organize people's hike itineraries, sort of where you go, so that you're not likely to run into anybody else, even when there's only maybe 3 or 4 other people in that whole space, period. So that's a big one for me. Let's kind of shift the focus away from me, because this question isn't really about me. What do you like about Forcing Out Direction? Is it the challenge, the aesthetic? Is it the group dynamics of hanging out with buddies, love doing this stuff? Is it, like the spiritual retreat, the solitude, the quietness of it? Is it what gets you excited about a trip like that?
Well, I don't know, like when I've been to Hawaii before, and I went and I hiked up Diamond Head on Oahu, and that was, I don't know, I feel like that was before I like even really wanted, like I shift my view into wanting to be a park ranger and stuff like that. But I feel like it's like I love hiking. I've been to all the state parks around in Illinois and around this area, and I feel like it's just like it's just like when you get to your end goal, when you hike somewhere, it's like that end goal, because like how pretty the scenery is. I just like going there. Just even by myself is fine with me too. I just like going out there, listening to some music, just I don't know, just going out there and just enjoying nature. I love it.
Okay, right on. So you might really enjoy a place like Zion National Park. So for example, we got the Grand Canyon. Everybody knows like it's this huge thing, and it's mile deep, and it's dozens of miles wide in places. And on temperature inversion days, if there's a controlled burn or a wildfire nearby, the smoke will go up, hit the thermal ceiling, and then fill in the canyon. And you see these little islands of rock sort of poking up out of it. It's gorgeous. There's a bunch of elk running around the campgrounds and stuff like that. It's one of the so-called crown jewel parks. Like it's one of the, if you're getting a postcard book of national parks, sure as you're going to get ticks in Southern Illinois, the Grand Canyon's going to be at least one of those postcards in there, and for good reason. Like it is amazing. And it's now maybe the second largest canyon known on the surface of the earth. They just found an even bigger one under the ice sheet in Greenland. But if the ice melt gets to a point where we can explore that canyon, civilization has already probably collapsed. So we'll enjoy the Grand Canyon. Zion is very much like the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon has all of its stuff, all of its development, all of its hotels and lodges and campgrounds and all that stuff on the rim, mostly on the south side. Zion National Park is the opposite. It's a beautiful steep-walled canyon, at least in terms of depth, on a scale with the Upper Grand Canyon. But all of the development, all the tour buses and hiking, or not all the hiking trails, but a bunch of them are along the river at the bottom of the canyon. So it's kind of like you flip the setup of the Grand Canyon, and that means that like the highland, the upper areas where it's not canyon at Zion, it's beautiful sandstone formations. It's part of the Grand Staircase, which is like this progressive set of lots and lots of different sandstone layers from ancient oceans. And if you go up to the high country in Yosemite or at Zion or at a place like that, you really kind of have it to yourself. And there are so many places, like around every bend, it feels like there's another spot where it feels like this is my destination. This is why I came. Oh, wait, I'm only 10% down the way on this hike. But I think I'm gonna chill and, maybe put on some tunes here and just kind of relax and take this in. And then I got 2 more of these before lunch. This is gonna be a good day. So you might want to think about a place like Zion, for example. And part of the plan for summer camp this year is to head there as well. So
Awesome. Thank you very
that'll be a
much.
thing. Yeah, Dan. Happy to help Zach. So that line of questioning goes for all of us here. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to the New York Islands, from the Redwood Forest, the Gulf Stream waters, et cetera, et cetera. This land was made for you and me, right? This is a very American sense of manifest destiny. And this is totally the opposite of the point of all this stuff happening in ancient times. This is for us, not the landed wealthy elites and so forth. So for example, when a Kardashian or somebody with typically a lot more wealth and influence, maybe privilege than what most of us here are kind of used to, when they want to do something like a picture perfect wedding at Zion National Park, there's a very beautiful popular spot called Angel's Landing that we go to on summer camp, and it's got this 1,200-foot cliffs on 3 sides. It's this tiny little rock promontory, and you can't fit that many people on it. And it's just, there's like everything, all the glory of Zion National Park arranged around you, 360 on this little rock spire. It's a fun kind of a 2-hour hike / climb up to it. When somebody powerful and influential wants to have their wedding ceremony up there, because this is a national park, they got to go through the same special use permit process that you or I would if we wanted to have our wedding there. And it's kind of cheap and inexpensive. Like you can't throw a bunch of extra money at the Park Service as an extremely wealthy person and get sort of preferential treatment. It just doesn't work like that. And this is kind of one of the last areas of American society where that's true, right? So you just can't really buy your way past everybody else typically with most things available in parks. So that's kind of the key message underlying all of this contrast, but also origins of how things are today. Okay, that's a great question, Luke. What else? We got a little bit more time, about 5 more minutes.
Can you explain a little bit more about the summer camp and like when that would be going, and do you need like, are there certain credentials that you need?
Sure. So that's a bigger question, and I need to get off my butt and announce basically the answer to your question in an informational meeting. Probably I could probably sneak one in tomorrow online, and definitely one next week. So the short version of summer camp is that for all forestry majors, rec camp or resource camp, typically between your junior and senior year, so that summer, is a requirement. If you're a resource person, you got to go to resource camp. If you're a rec person, you got to go to rec camp. If you're any of the other 3 specializations, you can do either one. They're both awesome. They're both 6 credits. They meet for 4 weeks during intersession, which is starting the week right after spring term exams. Then it's 4 weeks. And then after summer camp is over, immediately following that, you've got 8 weeks of the summer session. So people can sign up for other summer classes, head out and, do summer employment, stuff like that, get some maybe even federal experience at one of these parks doing a temp seasonal pathways position, if that's your thing. If you want to get a foot in the door early, which is highly recommended. And we go hard for 4 weeks. So resource camp does 2 weeks locally, classroom, day trips, like field site trips around the university farms, talking with a couple of local lumber mills, forestry practitioners of all kinds locally. And then they spend about 2 weeks going kind of medium to long distance out to Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area over in Kentucky. And typically they finish up with, it's like, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 days at Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and then come on home and everybody showers off and, you know, on to the next thing. Rec camp, we tend to spend anywhere from a couple of days to about the first week locally. And then we want to get to a bunch of national parks. And another part of the answer to Zach's question earlier about which national park would you recommend? We don't have a ton of national parks specifically close to us here in Southern Illinois. So for rec students, for watershed management students, for wildlife students, WAMCON students, we generally either go out west through Kansas, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico. We might dip down into Arizona just very briefly, and like hit a bunch of that stuff. Like it's big game country, stuff like that. And so where, you know, resources going east, we're either going west or we're going east, but also northeast. So this past summer, which unfortunately got canceled by COVID, we had to do the class online, which was not my favorite. We were going to go through Shenandoah National Park, Washington, D.C., up the eastern seaboard to Acadia National Park, which is an island national park off the coast of Maine and the Atlantic, and the boreal forest. And you got, you know, moose and bears and all that stuff. And then swing back into White Mountains National Forest, Green Mountains National Forest in Vermont, New Hampshire, and go for an alpine hiking trip along the Presidential Mountain Range, up to like up above tree line and stuff like that, looking down into the boreal forest on both sides up there. So we spent about 3 weeks on the road in rec camp, instead of kind of 2 or about 2 in resource camp. Is probably the primary structural difference between those two. And both classes are awesome. They are, in my estimation, absolutely worth it. Very occasionally we'll get somebody who takes both summer camp classes, but that's a little bit unusual. We definitely go hard. So in rec camp, we work hard and play hard. We go backpacking, whitewater rafting, canyoneering. We talk with a bunch of law enforcement rangers and wildlife habitat managers for things like elk, caribou, brown and black bears, mountain goats, Dall sheep, big cat folks, desert tortoise, all kinds of stuff. And water management out west. So like if you're a forest watersheds person, water rights out west are absolutely tremendously just out of control, insane. Like they're sucking so much water out of the aquifers around California that you can measure how much the land is subsiding or collapsing over those aquifers from space. NASA put out some really cool gravity studies. Anyway, whatever. So yeah, it's a 4-week class, meets after spring semester, before summer semester, and it's hopefully some of the most interesting weeks of your life. I love teaching that class. I learn stuff every time, and we get to go to a whole bunch of the crown jewel parks, no matter what itinerary we do. It's amazing. It's really, really cool. Like this might be, for some of you, hopefully, if I'm doing my job, one of the trips of a lifetime that you will get to take. So, so that's the short sales pitch for summer camp. We do have folks who take it after their freshman year. That's rare, but not impossible, at least for rec camp. It's unusual, but kind of common for folks who just finished their sophomore year, so before their junior year, to take summer camp. And then usually about half the class or more is folks just finished their junior year, about to start the senior year. And then every year we might get 1 or 2 folks where it's just worked out. They've finished everything else. They're a senior, maybe super senior, and they just got to finish off summer camp, and that's it. So we have a couple of folks like that, and typically they launch immediately from summer camp. They don't even necessarily need to come back to Carbondale afterwards because they've already moved out. So yeah, so sometimes we'll every year we drop off a couple of people at their summer job in Colorado or whatever, fighting fires or working at Rocky Mountain National Park or whatever. So it's pretty cool. All right, that is, it's 10:49 by my clock. So we are formally sort of done for our class session. I'll transcode this and upload it so you can see these answers to questions and go back over stuff as you're compiling your
tomorrow?
notes.
Tomorrow will you set up the next set of notes?
Yes, I'll release the next set of stuff. It's already visible, but I'll link it for you on the front page and
Thank you. That
throw
helps
it
a
into
lot,
the
just so I know
checklist
which
and
is
calendar.
which.
Yeah, I got you back.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you guys around. I'm still around for questions if you need anything.
Bye.
Dr. Park, I just want to say that is so dope because my wife and I, we were planning an East Coast trip because I have a 4Runner and we have rooftop tent and stuff. So we were
Yeah,
gonna
okay.
go to Cuyahoga in Ohio, stop at
Yeah.
like 9/11, Gettysburg, go all the way up to New York and Rhode Island, and then go
Okay.
to Acadia, take like the National Scenic Mainway all the way up there, go
Yeah,
across the
good.
border in Canada into New Brunswick because they have like a no light zone or whatever.
Yeah, there's a, was it, can't remember if it's caribou or elk, but there's an enormous migration that they gotta manage for all that stuff. Up into like Cap Gaspé, you know,
Yeah,
out past Maine.
yeah,
So
they got canceled, which kind of sucked because COVID. But yeah,
I
it's
feel you. We were ready to go last summer for summer camp, and it's just like, we don't know enough about this COVID stuff. We can't keep everybody safe in these vans. Got to
Right.
pull the plug. And
Did
it
you even
broke
drive
my
your own
heart.
vehicle?
Huh?
Like on the trips, could you drive your own vehicle and like follow along the van or?
Yeah. We have people do that. Not every year. It's a lot of miles.
That's what I do with this thing. It's a beast.
Okay.
Because
I mean, you might as well use it, right? So yeah, you could totally do that. Bring your wife along. If you guys have a dog or whatever, that's fine too. But yeah, so it's really up to you. I typically kind of like flip flop the itineraries to keep it fresh for me. I love all of these different routes. Like we tried to get to Yellowstone one year, we got snowed out. Some very occasionally we'll do a trip down through like northern Florida and Okefenokee and stuff like that, and finish up at Great Smokies as well. But I love the trip out west, and I love the trip up east. My wife and I fell in love at Acadia National Park, so it's got that whole like personal extra layer on top of being one of the most popular and beautiful parks in the world. So
Sweet.
Yeah.
Have you ever?
But yeah, no, you're totally welcome to take a personal vehicle, and we'll have some info out. Maybe hopefully this afternoon or tomorrow to get that train started for folks thinking about it for sure.
Have you ever been to Glacier National Park?
I have not. I've been right up against it on a research trip, and I just didn't have time to get over the border into it. But we've sent a bunch of students there to work, like summer, like temp seasonal type things, and a couple of folks have actually become rangers there fairly recently. So I'm not sure if they're still there, but yeah.
People, from what I've heard, like it's not like a big one like Yellowstone and all that. It's like less people, you have it more to yourself, and Teton.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, that's like the two I want to hit for sure.
Yeah. And throw in Yellowstone between them and you're good, right? So yeah, I'm 100% in support of that. I enjoyed the heck out of Teton. We did a research project there several years ago with the whitewater rafting on the Snake River headwaters that runs right in front of the Teton Range.
Oh, that's cool.
And through Jackson Hole. And there's some real good people working there and so forth. So yeah, if you guys are still planning on maybe like rescheduling that trip for this summer, doing that after summer camp, if you decided to do summer camp or around when summer camp's happening and we're heading west and you're heading east, I got tons of maps and good beta for spots to stealth camp for free. And, like I got to put together this huge stack of itineraries and contingency plans, like where's the nearest hospital at all these places and all that stuff for class. I would love to throw any of that at you when you guys decide to kind of reconstitute that trip,
For sure.
because it's not doing anybody any good just sitting in my drawer, right? So I'm 100% into that.
I'm
Yeah.
definitely gonna try and have you for future classes. I'm a transfer student, so
Okay, welcome.
yeah.
Is this your first semester or?
It is, yeah. So
Yeah.
I'm about to finish up my associates, but yeah, so it's like going into my junior year, I guess.
Yeah,
Uh,
right on.
I
Okay.
just I just switched it to forestry for my major because this is like my thing. I told my wife like national park freaks, like we have the national park book and get our stamps and collect like every like we're nerds and but like
Yeah.
that's our fulfillment. Like we get tons of enjoyment out of it. And she's like, why don't you do that for a career? And I was like, is that even a thing? And I found out
Sounds
SIU.
like you have a cool wife. That's awesome that she's supporting you in that. That's awesome.
So yeah, so I was looking around and SIU was one of the top ones.
Mhm.
And I was like, no way. Like I'm from Northern Illinois, like by Chicago. So I was like,
Okay.
for us, like we're still close to family, but we're far from them, So we got our space.
Yeah, hopefully far, like just far enough. Yeah.
Yeah,
My dad actually worked at Xavier University over in Cincinnati, where I grew up, and you can go usually to a university a little bit cheaper if one of your parents works there. And Dad swore up and down that like he would not like stop by the dorms unannounced. If I decided to go to Xavier, and I believe that he meant that, but I was the same way. I went like it ended up being about an 8-hour drive to where I went to school in South Carolina. So, but yeah, no, we are super into national parks. All of my research is um, at national parks. We work with a lot of those folks. A lot of the folks that went through grad school with me, a lot of our students here in this program go into the park service. Either immediately or eventually. Like sometimes you got to hire into maybe a Forest Service fire crew to get federal standing and experience and then get into the Park Service. Park Service is a little bit smaller, so it's a little bit more competitive. And a lot of the job postings are kind of a lot sexier, like working at Teton or Glacier or something like that, instead of one of the equally beautiful but less well understood, less well known national forests. They tend to be sort of furnished right around each other. Um, so yeah, it sounds like you sort of found your way into a good spot here. And I would love to, meet with you during office hours to chat more about your specific sort of trajectory and your plans and stuff like that, and can help kind of
yeah,
lay some stuff out. We have a lot of transfer students in this program. Close to half of our students are kind of in your shoes, and I don't want it to feel sort of intimidating or confusing to look at the kind of the course set that we have. It's a lot of stuff to tackle in 2 years within the discipline, but um, it can be done. It can absolutely be done, and you're not alone. You're not the first one to kind of piece it together. So
right on.
yeah, let's stop by during office hours sometime or whatever, and let's chat some more. All right?
Okay. And I have one more question. It's just about the
Yeah.
extra credit. So
Okay.
so like you're saying like we could do that while hiking and stuff. So like I do photography like with nature too. Like I love to, like that's my serenity, like my peace. Um, so with that, do I just like take pictures and I can write about it and I like explain what's going on? Because my dog, I found some deer fur that got ripped out of it, and my dog was going nuts sniffing it, and I wanted to take a picture, but
Yeah, no, please do. So the idea with the extra credit is just like whatever you were already going to go do in your case anyway,
mhm,
just take some photos of that
okay,
and caption any of the photos with not just like this is my trip to such and such local park or Shawnee National Forest or whatever. I had a good time. The weather was nice. It was fun. The end.
right,
For each photo, if there's anything that we've talked about in class or kind of looking through the syllabus that we will talk about in class,
mhm,
um, point that factor in that photo out to me, just so I kind of know what I'm looking at. So I have any sense of how you're thinking about our class topics as you're finding them through your viewfinder's frame.
okay,
And there
awesome.
we go. All right.
I appreciate talking to you.
Cool. Blow out the extra credit. Use
Alright.
it as an excuse like every week if you want to, man. You're not gonna overwhelm me with it. So rock and
Sure.
roll.
All right. See you later.
See you around.